Welcome back to the Paradigm Project. Today we have a very exciting guest. We have Mr. Burt here with us, who is the orchestra and band mentor here at Paradigm. We are so excited to talk a little bit about music and a little bit about expression and how that fits into the great conversation of ideas. So let's get right into kind of getting to know Mr. Burt for those of you who don't know him. So tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your experience in education, what brought you to Paradigm, things like that.
Yeah. Thanks. My name's Mr. Burt, Daniel Burt. I'm in my first year here at Paradigm and finishing up soon.
Yeah, it's
Surprise.
Crazy.
Yeah, wow. That kind of, I'm finishing up.
I know, right? Just hitting me now. I'm like,
yeah,
graduation's a
just
thing.
Now that I say it, yeah.
I've seen some seniors getting stuff in the mail, like cap and gowns and everything.
I'm a little bit jealous, but
it's
anyways.
unnerving.
It is really weird. I'm not ready, but I am ready. Anyways, moving on.
Right. So I'm finishing my first year here. I heard about the job last summer. Actually, a little before then, I was substitute teaching down in Utah Valley. I went to school at BYU in Provo. And I was substitute teaching down in Spanish Fork. And the orchestra teacher there, who had me in, told me that there was a job somewhere in South Jordan at a charter school. And she sent me the link. So it was Angela Harmon is her name. She knows Sarah Arneson. She knows Miss Arneson. So that's how she knew about it. Anyway, I looked it up, and they had me in, and I came in and interviewed, and I guess they liked me enough to bring me to the second portion, which was to have the scholars come and play. So we had all the band and orchestra scholars in here, and I came and did like a 10-minute little run-through and rehearsal with them. I think we played something from Handel's Messiah, which was super fun. And then we had some Q&A time. And the next day I got a call, or later that afternoon, I think I got a call, and Mr. Seminaria said, "Hey, we want you to be on the faculty." And I was like, "Great, that's awesome." So
Heck yeah.
that's the story.
I was there.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of
I
fun.
wanted to be there, and then I wasn't. But I heard a lot of really good things.
Yeah. No, it was my first. All my other jobs before now have been like in college kind of jobs, and
Right.
Even in grad school, it still felt a little bit in an isolated environment. So it was a big process for me stepping out and kind of learning all about that process, and getting a job was a lot of fun.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, now I'm here. I've really loved the year. I feel like I've grown a ton. It's been as much school as I ever did in college, just like learning to be here, and I've really, really enjoyed just meeting everybody and working with all the scholars.
Heck yeah.
So what have been some formative experiences in your life when it comes to music?
When it comes to music, I have never not been involved in music as far as I can remember. My mother put me into piano lessons, Suzuki piano lessons, when I was almost 3 years old, so I was still 2.
Dang.
And I remember sitting at my teacher's piano and dangling my feet and kind of just pressing some keys, and it felt like I was playing around, She did that because I was like whistling little bits of my sister's piano sonatas that they were doing in their pieces, and she's like, "Well, we should get him into piano." So it was always, I guess, from before my memories really go back to, I was interested in music, and it's just been like breathing for me. And not that it's taken no work; it's taken tons of work, but it's just been very natural to me all my life.
Right. That's fantastic.
That's awesome. I really appreciate when those opportunities have an opportunity to flourish in young people.
Right.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't
lucky
know
to
if I
have
can say young people. I am a young person.
Right.
younger folk. Yeah.
So back in my day,
Yeah.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
back when I was in orchestra with Miss Arneson, we talked a lot about musical experiences and specific stages that have impacted us. And I know that for myself, there are a few specific stages where I have performed or just experienced some sort of masterclass, etc. That have really impacted my life, not just in music, but in other places as well. Are there any specific places or specific concerts that have impacted you like that?
Concerts or places. I'm going to reach back again since we're going back to early days of Danny. This is one that I have heard this story from my parents. I don't remember it, but apparently they took me to a brass quintet concert, the Portneuf Brass. Portneuf River goes through Pocatello, Idaho, near where I grew up. Port Neif Brass Quintet. I don't even know if they were good. I mean, I think they were because they were college professors, but I don't know. But apparently to my 2-year-old self, they were really great. I stood up on the pew. It was in like a little church or something. Stood up on the pew the entire time. My older brother was like goofing around, couldn't stay still, but I was like transfixed. And I told my mom, when I'm a freshman in high school, right? When I'm a freshman, I'm going to play the trumpet. When I'm a sophomore, I'm going to play the French horn. When I'm junior, I'm going to play the trombone. And when I'm a senior, I'm going to play the tuba. And that was just like, yes, the tuba.
That's
And
fantastic.
I think I went backstage with my parents, and the tuba player like took apart his whole instrument and took all the little tuning slides out and like showed me around. I probably stuck my head in the bell, something like that. And I think it just one more spark,
Right.
in the fire of my interest in music.
I love that so much. That is adorable.
It's a weird one to pull out with that question, but
Right.
you
No,
know,
but that's
I was
that's
just thinking
great.
about early experiences.
Yeah.
Plenty since then, of course.
Right. Naturally.
So what is your favorite thing about music?
Ooh.
I don't really know, to be honest.
A favorite, a good thing,
Yeah.
a good quality of
Yeah.
music. I don't know.
Well, I love music, and it's today. You know what? I'll just answer for today, or just like around now. I find that music is a tool for me to. I don't know. Let me think. So, my favorite thing about music, it's a broad question, but I would say I'm going to just make that plural. My favorite things about music. That's
There we go.
easier for me.
And I imagine that
Do
it
it.
would evolve over time. and
Yeah,
things
it
like
does.
that. Mhm.
That's actually a good way to start, because when I was in, late elementary school, middle school, high school, my favorite thing about music was just playing it really well, playing it with other people who played really well, and I wanted to just reach the highest level, as far as skill and stuff, because the music that was most powerful to me, that really moved me inside, was I would say at that time probably like great classical music. I was a pianist primarily and a trombonist second, although I put a lot of time in on trombone too. But I would go to my piano lessons each week in Pocatello with my mom. She was driving me, and we would just listen to CDs of Chopin or Beethoven or Rachmaninoff, and they're just incredible players, incredible music. And then I'd go into my lesson and work on the details, and just really shoot for a high level. Now, later in my life, I think that changed. Actually, during music school, this funny thing happens if you go to music school. You go from being the really talented kid in your town to being one of so many that are just all the same. They're all good, but they're all the same. So you don't really feel special anymore. And I had to figure out that some of my identity I'd built on this idea that I was really good at music. And I kind of went through a little personal crisis during that time. Like, what am I if there are all these other people that are as good or better, right? And so, I came to resolutions on my own, but on the musical side, I started to love music for its ability to connect and communicate and to touch people, for me to feel the connection between myself and another as I play and they listen, or vice versa, as they play and I listen. I guess I learned to treat it as more of a language and a tool for expression, as our topic is today. But more than just, personal expression, like, ooh, I want to tell the world how wonderful I am inside, right? Which it can help you do that, but it also can help you communicate and really connect with someone on a way that other kinds of language can't.
That's definitely something that I love about music as well, and something that I've had a lot of conversations about, is that music really is a way to connect, and it is a really beautiful language. In some of Miss Arneson's classes, she would talk about sharing the light, and that expanded into like share the light, be the light, create the light, find the light, etc. But it was a way of expressing light both to the people around you, the people you're playing with, but also to the audience, and to be able to find that connection, to be able to find that expression and that passion through something so simple, you know? And I think that that's an absolutely beautiful concept.
Yeah, if I may insert my own thoughts too. I've been involved with music in various capacities for most of my life as well. And I know initially it started out as much more of a personal thing. Like I'd go to lessons, I'd play the music, I'd go to recitals, and then I'd go back, I'd have new pieces. And I'd work on that. And it was very much just like me, working with a teacher to perform, and then cycle repeats, right? And I don't think I valued that communicative aspect as much as I did now. And that's something that I really love about Paradigm's band and orchestra program, is that it really emphasizes that. And until I came to Paradigm and performed as part of their symphony, I was part of concert band. In concert band, orchestra, and a symphonic ensemble, there's this feeling that you don't get anywhere else of like working together to create a really, really beautiful piece of art.
Amen.
Yeah. No, music is unique in that way in the art world, in that there is not a real way. I mean, we have recording and we have video, but there's not a real way to experience the work again until you do it again. Like you have to relive it. And I guess especially before music was able to be recorded, like the written page of music is not music. We bring it to school and we call, oh, did you forget your music? You know, like it's not your music. It's the page, which has like about 5% of the information you need to play the music.
Paper and ink.
Yeah, it shows you the notes and rhythms and
a
few little things. But it doesn't tell you what music you need to play.
Right.
You have to get that from experience with music, which is kind of a definition in the definition.
Right,
but
and it's the learning the language. You know, if you're inexperienced and you look at a page of sheet music and you're like, well, there's dots on and lines and symbols and I have no idea what that means. And then you put it in front of a professional and they say, oh, I see so much further and I can interpret this into something because of the experience.
Exactly.
It reminds me of the other day there was actually a college representative who came to the school, and he talked about this contrast. And in his mind, there was a contrast between living and being alive.
Great.
And like, you can live and you can play the notes on the paper, right? But the notes don't come alive without you adding some of your music in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's such a collaboration between the original creator of the music and the performer. In the art world, which encompasses drama and visual art and poetry and novels and, whatever else. There's something unique to music, and there are things unique to every one of those that I've mentioned. But one of the unique things is that the original artist is almost at the mercy of the performers to be able to communicate what they felt. It's a collaboration from the start. Now, in the modern world, where a lot of kinds of music now are produced or can be produced like right on a laptop or with software, that changes, but still it's a collaboration with those who designed the software and those who designed the sound patches and those kinds of things. It's one of those aspects that I really love about music, that especially in classical, jazz, and many modern styles as well, the composer is only a part of the piece. The largest part, maybe. Right. But the performer has a huge influence, and it's one of the reasons we keep returning to classical pieces over and over again, because they're different every time, and it's fun to participate, I guess that's true in like the theater world as well, right? For sure. So like Shakespeare wrote the thing, but reading Shakespeare is not Shakespeare.
No.
Right. Like the content of what you say in theater is really important. But, you can inflect it in so many different ways that can give the phrase entirely new meaning.
Right.
I think that's equally true of musical phrases.
That is so cool. My brain is just exploding right now.
Yeah, every new artist gets to be a part of the creativity.
That is so cool. But I mean, you're entirely right in that. Like it's so cool to look at that and say, I can be a part of this. And that's where the personal expression comes in, is that even if you're playing in an orchestra, and even if you have, you know, your conductor and they help influence kind of how that goes, and there's the markings in the music, whatever, but it is still a personal expression. You are still part of that. You're still impacting the sound. Any ensemble would not be the same without one or two or any of the players, you know? And it takes the whole of the ensemble to create that piece. So there's that individual expression, but there's the unity that you can find in it, and that's really cool.
Yeah, as Michael was referring to earlier, it's that unity and the connection in the ensemble members. One of the main motivations for me that always led me to band and then to orchestra classes and jazz band and in high school and college is that there really is a kind of feeling that I don't get to really access in myself anywhere else. I remember, I think one of the things that stands out to me were my experiences playing in BYU's big band Synthesis, which is a great big band. I think I was in that ensemble more than any other ensemble in my college career, and there was just an experience every time we got on stage, whether we were doing great that night or doing just okay, you know, there's just an energy there in that band that is just a lot of fun, and the audience is always thrilled to be there. And you hit off something really exciting, and there's just, you know, the room lights up. And for me, that just it turns my brain on. I feel like the rest of my life I'm operating at 84%, and then the rest of it is only accessible when I'm in the moment performing, and it just really is. It's a thrill for me. Right.
That's definitely one of the things that I miss most about ensemble playing, because there is, since I haven't been able to be in any of the orchestras or bands, and I've done a little bit of things with jazz a little bit this year, but I've mostly been doing some solo vocal work. But I genuinely miss the experience of performing with an ensemble, and at times I might look at it and say, well, I mean, there's the contrast of you know, I am one of many, that's fine, but it's not. I am one of many, and that is cool. Having that connection, having that experience with everybody else and with the ensemble, there's plenty of wonderful things for solo work. That is great. And sometimes that even gives more experience to connect with the audience, which is beautiful. But being able to work together with other people to create a beautiful piece of music, and then being able to perform that with other people. And one of the things that I loved was I used to be able to look up and see people in the violin section or in the viola section, or sometimes, depending on the angle, the cello section, or our director, and being able to catch eyes and know that, oh, this is the part that we kept messing up and now we're playing it right, or this is the part where something funny happened that one time, and having those memories and that connection and that emotion is, you can't recreate it anywhere else. Like you keep saying, there is nowhere else where you can find that same feeling.
Right. Yeah. There are lots of people, and there are many pieces, but it all comes together to make this whole. And in the end, that's what encompasses everything. Even the audience, like you were saying, becomes kind of a part of that. I remember in a couple of band performances here, we'd be on stage. There are a couple parts that we could play, but it was real shaky, right?
Just a little bit sketchy. It's fine.
Yeah. And so we'd be on stage, and you could almost feel the anxiety of the band around that part. But then we'd go through it, we'd pull through it. It would be like the best time we've ever gone through it. That wasn't every time, but there would be all of a sudden this collective relief, and everybody just had this kind of giddy feeling.
It's high stakes.
Right.
Yeah, it's high stakes in performance, and if you can succeed or fail, and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail. And it's like playing. I grew up playing baseball too, and it's like sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and you go home crushed when you lose. Especially it's like you were about to win the tournament and then you didn't, and they won and you didn't, and it sucks. But it's high stakes, and you wouldn't have the ability to feel as great as it does when you succeed if you didn't have the possibility of failure.
Right. Oh, I love that. Something I used to say back when I played in our jazz band and I was playing bass was there's nothing like the high of playing a good bass line with your jazz band, because the vibes are just good and you're just looking around and sometimes like you have no idea what's going on, or sometimes people will be whatever, but being able to just vibe together and being able to be in that groove.
It's like in the pocket.
In the pocket.
Yeah, that's a term.
I didn't know that
use?
was a term,
Or
but we can.
in the groove.
Yes, in the groove, something like that. Anyways,
Stevie Wonder song. What is it?
I don't
it's
know.
the song. It's Sir Duke.
Oh.
Just because a record has a groove, don't make it in the groove.
Oh,
right?
it's so good. That was
back when
good
records had
times.
grooves on them, and that's how they played music.
Right.
But no, Colin, I think that is a good. I wonder if that's a good place to go, because I think there are probably
That
a lot
would
of
be.
people listening that have experience in music, but I don't know how many of them will have experience in orchestra class versus band versus, maybe they're in an R&B group, or they're in a rock band, or they like to sing in the shower to Mariah Carey.
Heck yeah.
Like there's a big, beautiful world of music out there, and I think maybe talking about how they're similar and how they're different could be a cool place to go.
Heck yeah. And heck, do you want to, or do you want me to, or heck, you could.
Versus, sorry.
No, you're
go
good.
ahead and ask questions if you had them too. I don't want to steer us too far off.
No, I want to. We can talk about anything right now. Did we want you to play in the middle, or do we want to do that? I don't know. I don't know when would be a good time.
Well, I think.
I feel like we're having a great discussion now that we're talking about our discussion, but.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, I'm getting caught up in it.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, I think
good. It's good. That's a good thing.
If you would like to, I could go through some of the ways in which I, kind of some of the different influences in my life, and just talk about the differences and similarities in music, in various styles, and I can kind of demonstrate some of those things.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Does that sound good?
Yeah. Heck yeah.
So Mr. Burt, you have been a pianist. You're a trombonist. Those are both instruments that, a lot of instruments too, but those two in particular are instruments that get employed in a lot of different ways over a lot of different genres. How do you feel like that affects the experience?
My experience in music, generally?
And with performance or practice or being in the groove?
Sure, yeah. Well, there's a different kind of groove, if you will, in classical music versus R&B, like I play with my band now. I started as a pianist, as I mentioned earlier, and then started trombone in 6th grade, and I was singing in like a children's choir, and then I took some voice lessons in high school as well from my mother, all of which had big influences on my kind of development as a musician. Sorry, the question again was...
So when it comes to playing in different genres, how does that affect the experience?
Sorry, the experience being...
The experience being, I think in particular, that performance is what comes to mind, is with classical. There's definitely, it evokes different emotions, different kind of, sometimes that can be the same emotions, right?
Yeah.
But it has altogether a different kind of approach to making that. And it's the same with like jazz or R&B and things like that.
Yeah. Well, okay, great, thanks. No, one of the things...
Not clarifying initially.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the things that I like to remind my scholars when we're talking about music, maybe I don't say it enough, but, when Mozart was writing classical music, he was not writing classical music. He was writing music. That was just music, right? And he was writing music for the court, right? The royal court, the nobles. And then there was also folk music at the time. One of my favorite things about music is that there is no place in the world that it doesn't exist. It's like food. Everybody has food. Everybody has music, right? There's yeah. But no, really, like every group of people has music, and so in that way, there are some things that will be the same, from Mozart to Stevie Wonder, or Bach to one of my favorite current hip hop musicians is Anderson .Paak. Great, he's awesome. But there are things that will be the same. And I think some of those things, if I can speak as the authority for all of music, which I am certainly not, but one of those things is that it expresses the, I'm about to say something that's true for all of music, but it's ultimately a difference between styles. It expresses the cultural values of the people that create it. So in Mozart's day, since we're on Mozart, he was writing for a group that was refined and wealthy. They were different. Genres were created at different times, but to the people creating them, they were just music, right? And so there are things that connect all music together. Among those things are just personal expression, expressing unity with your brothers and sisters, your family, your friends, your group, right? For me, I think the same things that connected my early experiences with music that made them kind of really exciting to me were the same things that kept me going in college, and now, even when I switched into other kinds of music. So, yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question there.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. All right. What are some of your favorite pieces of music?
Good question. I think the way that I'd like to answer that would be kind of choosing a few pieces of music from different parts of my life or different influences in my life. The first one being my mother, who is the reason I am a musician. Both the reason that I started and the reason that I kept going. She was the one who made me practice. So until I learned to love it enough to want to myself. But she is an opera singer. She's a classical soprano. And one of the pieces that I remember most from listening to her sing and teach many times over the course of my childhood was Dvorak's Song to the Moon from his opera Rusalka. Something in the way that my mom does it is just really moving to me. And it was the one piece that, so as a kid, you kind of hate what your parents do. Like, you don't think they're very good at whatever they do, even if they do it extremely well, which is the case with my mother. She's very good. And I thought it was weird. I thought opera was weird. And when all my friends would hear her sing in church or something, I would shrivel up into the size of a raisin and beet red. I was just so embarrassed at first, which is such a mean thing for a kid to do to his mom. But eventually I grew up, and as a teenager, I started to really love what she was doing. But through all of that time, I always loved this piece. It's just very emotional. Yeah.
I see that we just so happen to have a trombone.
We do just so happen to have a trombone.
Just
in the room.
casually.
Casually, I just brought my trombone in the room.
Would you like to play a bit of that piece for us?
Yeah, I'll demonstrate a little of that.
I'm talking into my mic.
This is a little bit of Rusalka's Song to the Moon. Forgot a little part there, then I'm going to go here. Let's see. Let me do that again. Something like that.
It's wonderful.
It's beautiful. I'm
And
not crying. You're crying.
to give another point to like the irreplaceable nature of like live music. And I mean, not. I think that's going to be wonderful over podcast format too. But there's, it's wonderful even in this little, kind of sketchy studio.
Hey, it's
That
our
spirit can
sketchy
be
studio.
felt.
It's yes, it's
Yeah.
our sketchy studio. There you go.
It's a great studio.
It is. We love it.
It's a warm studio right now.
Very
Amen.
warm. Yeah.
Yeah. But to finish your thought, I mean, you can finish it if you want to, but even though we are in, our sketchy studio, and it's such a small room, and we're here together doing, just recording a podcast, and it's just a simple line of melody, there's still a feeling, there's still the emotion, there's still the expression, because I mean, on your end, you have the memories that are connected to it, and you have this passion for the song, and on our end, it's something that I haven't necessarily heard as much. But being able to hear your stories and then hear you play it and hear the phrasing and the emphasis that you bring to this piece it makes me emotional on my side, even though it's something that I haven't experienced and something that I haven't necessarily heard as much, because you are able to express through that piece. And I think that's really a beautiful concept. And I hope that our listeners can experience a little bit of that as well, even in the listening of the podcast. But there's nothing like live music on any scale. And I think that's wonderful.
There is, thanks. Yeah, it really is a meaningful piece to me because of my mom's connection, but also just it's just a beautiful piece of music. And I think great, to an earlier point, great composition in music, or great composition in anything, right? But in music, great composition allows us to have a vehicle for great expression. Something that is of lesser quality, right? A piece maybe that I would write because I'm not much of a composer, but something that is of lesser quality than this masterpiece wouldn't necessarily afford the performer as much room to communicate and to express. And that's, I think, one of the criteria that I think of when I think of, like, what is a great piece of music.
Right. That's interesting. That makes me think of going back to earlier when you were talking about your kind of journey in music and wanting to be better, because it's not just about the piece, it's also about the musician. Like, if you don't put in the time, if you don't put in the practice and work on your skills, then you can't communicate it regardless of how good the piece is. A great piece of music played by a bad musician is still a bad piece of music.
Right. That's why the composer's kind of at the mercy of whoever's playing it. They're, unless, you were privileged enough to hear Bach play something that he wrote on the organ, right? Or, the great composers that also played.
Sometimes I try to imagine what it would have been like if I were like seeing like Beethoven like improvise a piece on the piano or something.
Right.
It'd be so
I
cool.
want.
But here's the thing, like, that was their music then, and we love it now, right? We still love it. And a lot of people dedicate their lives to classical music, but we have this massive world of music now that's maybe more accessible and more alive than ever. One of the things that one of the switches that I turned in my brain in music school, that I was in school for classical music technically, I was doing a lot of jazz, then I was doing a lot of more modern music too, is like this idea that all the great music happened many years ago, and that's ridiculous. Yes, I would give almost anything to go see Beethoven play, or right, it would be a thrill. But I mean, while Stevie Wonder's still alive, I'm going to try to make it to a concert, and there are kids now, like 15-year-old kids that are just like Mozart was when he was a 15-year-old kid, like if you open yourself up, I guess is my point, to all kinds of music, there are Mozarts now. Absolutely. There are those level of musicians now in our modern world.
And there's even kind of this like Western focus we have, especially here in like Europe and the Americas.
Yeah, here in Europe.
Oh goodness, I wish.
The Western world, I know what you're saying.
I mean,
Our little studio is moved while we're in it.
Is this the TARDIS?
Oh, I wish. I wish it was
so
bigger on the
cool.
inside.
But yeah, I think there is this kind of like Western focus that we have, and something that I've listened to recently is some music from Eastern countries.
Yeah.
Like some like kind of Japanese music from around that time. I have a friend right now who's um really into the history of like Islamic countries,
Great.
and he showed me some music from that time too. And it's stuff that we don't hear anything like in our strictly like American paradigm of music. But and I don't want to like nationalize music as a concept.
No. But that's a really good point, Michael. And I'm glad you brought it up, because as long as we're talking about similarities between and also differences between kinds of music, there very much is a difference between music from different cultural groups. And I think we should see the similarities, but we should also see the differences. One of my best classes in college was world music, and we got to explore a few different examples. But really, what we were talking, so we looked at Indian music from India, right, and Balinese music. It's an island in Indonesia, and then West African drumming patterns and stuff, and just used those as touch points to talk about kind of some of the ways that music has similarity and differences across different styles. But it's a good point. I mean, there are things that we have never heard here in America that just would blow your mind, and there's a big world out there. It's a lot of fun to hear different people's music.
There, now that I think about it, I really like history, and so sometimes when I'm learning about music, I like to learn about the history of a piece or something like that, right? Um, which I think is a very valuable thing. Um, but the history of music, like you're saying, is something that's really cool. And now, even now that I think about it, like the American paradigm of music we have, um, it would have like boggled the minds of classical composers
Yeah,
several years
absolutely.
ago. I mean, like you're saying, like music for anyone is just music for them at the time. It doesn't have a specific
Mm-hmm.
label attached to it necessarily. I've been doing some like research on jazz and things like that, and jazz is something that has a lot of multicultural influences that I think it's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, jazz is a major influence in my life, and so I'm glad you brought it up. And one of my, as much as I just said it's really great to hear music from far off places, one of my big passions is the diversity of music from within America, and jazz is one of the most American of any kinds of music, because it really couldn't have happened anywhere else. There's an influence from Europe for sure, like through classical music. In jazz we use basically the same kinds of harmony, just with a little more color on the chord. And then there's this major influence from Africa, which came because of the slaves, because of the slave trade. These people taken from their home against their will, now transplanted into this foreign country with incredible hardship, still brought their music, and they had songs and percussion rhythms that through the centuries before jazz was created, became kind of a unique Black American vocabulary, and then almost against the will of a lot of the culture at the time, they merged with a lot of the rhythms. I say against their will because of the Jim Crow laws or whatever you have, but there was almost an unavoidable energy and joy in that music that it actually is one of the forces that I believe helped end some of the worst segregation kinds of laws. I think in line with that, some of my favorite pieces of music question, I'd like to share just a little bit of jazz and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
1 second while I think of what to share. Let's see. What's that?
Do we need to move your mic?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
Okay.
Of pieces. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Do you want to stand up and stretch?
I'm trying to think of.
I mean, you're kind of trapped. Yeah.
I can't remember the name of that song. Bill Bailey, won't you come home? That's what it is. Yeah. So there's an like an era of early jazz that we call traditional jazz, before the big band era, right? This is kind of Louis Armstrong's first iteration. He changed a lot of styles throughout his life, but when he was a kid and also like in his 20s, 1910s, early 1920s, this style of jazz was taking the world by storm as the first like records were being created, right? Records of music. It's a very new thing. And one of these songs is called Bill Bailey, which is one of my favorites. It's a lot of fun. Here's that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, jazz is an incredible
Mm-hmm.
form of music, and
Right.
definitely not to say that others aren't. I think there's so much expression available within all different forms of music, and it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things about jazz is that in contrast to some of the classical, because a lot of the time the classical, there's maybe more rules, and there's plenty of rules for jazz, but there's more rules, it's more strict, it's more precise, and there is still room for expression, but it has more precise technique, whereas jazz, you get so much real, raw, and genuine sound from people.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people who, taught themselves and didn't know proper technique, which is fine because they created these crazy amazing sounds, and these crazy unique styles. And that's one of the reasons that I love jazz so much, is because it is so expressive and there is so much freedom, and it is raw. And even then, if you look at some of the vocal stuff, and I mean, instrumental does this as well, but vocal stuff, there's plenty of vocalists that the tone is just so raw, and maybe it's gravelly, maybe it's got interesting vowels, things like that, but it's so beautiful because it's unique, because it's different,
Yeah, that's one of jazz's. If I was to talk about one of the main values in jazz, again, I'm not the authority on this, but one of them is individualism, and I think that's in line with kind of our American experiment here in this country. We have this incredible country that's built to allow people to have freedom, and jazz is freedom. Wynton Marsalis leads the Jazz at Lincoln Center Band in New York City. Really important thinker and player. He's one of the great trumpet players of our time. In jazz, he says jazz is America's classical music. He kind of links it with the values of America, democracy and freedom. And like you were saying, Kellen, what's beautiful in jazz is what's individual and what is creative. And it doesn't necessarily have to conform to someone else's idea of what a good sound is. So a vocalist can sing way down in her vocal fry register, and then go way up into a whistle register and not necessarily have it sound beautiful and operatic the whole time, because the difference in color is exciting. And one of the things that early jazz, like brass players, were finding out, I have my mutes out there, I should show a plunger mute or something soon, but is that you could play things with these instruments that weren't allowed before. I mean, these instruments are orchestral instruments from Europe, but they took these instruments and found sounds that were, not done before on the hundreds of years that they'd been around. Like this kind of thing. So, all sorts of things you can use in jazz that weren't really allowed in classical music for one reason or another. But became possible in jazz. And I think, again, it speaks to the specific kinds of expression that were valued in that style of music.
Right. Something actually really interesting when you were talking about the vocal ranges, and I mean the whole thing, but vocal ranges and going way down, dirty in your chest voice, and then going way up high and not having to be perfect or precise. I think one of the reasons why people connect to that so much is because that's how life is. Life isn't perfect. Life isn't precise. Life isn't perfect. Life isn't precise. Life doesn't have this, pristine one option.
Yeah.
And that is why people love jazz and love that type of music, is because it replicates life. It replicates what you're doing in your everyday. If I want to be able to express that, sometimes life sucks, or sometimes life is beautiful.
Yeah.
Right. And being able to say, I'm not perfect, and neither is my music, because that's the way that I express, is through this imperfect but beautiful form. And it's the imperfections and the inconsistencies and the individualism that makes it beautiful.
There are a couple quotes I looked up while you guys were talking because it really reminded me of this. I only had one initially, but then Kellen was talking and it was in the Google Images results. But it reminded me a lot of what she was saying. I heard a couple quotes attributed to Charlie Parker, who is a really famous and influential jazz saxophonist. And this quote that he supposedly said is, music is your own experience, your own thoughts, your wisdom. If you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn. And he's basically saying that if you don't live your life and see all of those experiences and take them in, your ability to express is limited. Life is meant for living. And then there was another quote that I've known for a long time, and it always lightens up my practicing. But he says, you've got to learn your instrument. Then you practice, practice, practice. And then when you finally get up there on the bandstand, forget all that and just wail.
Yeah.
It's the good stuff.
Yeah. And it really, that quote lends itself to that spirit of improvisation that we're talking about and that really raw performance.
Right. Oh, I love it so much.
I was going to say...
We need to wrap up, just so you know.
I want to say one more thing.
Please do.
On jazz and this idea. One of the great things about jazz, people love about jazz, is its energy and its joy. That's one of the same things I love about it. The beautiful thing, it's almost unbelievable that it happened, is that it came out of the incredible sorrow of slavery and segregation and racism that black people felt in the United States. And how did they create this joyful music from that experience? And it, as far as I understand it, it comes from the blues first, which was them. If you've heard like really old blues from the earliest days of recording, it's them trying to sing through the sadness. They're singing in spite of the sadness, even though the lyrics may be down, right? They're singing in spite of it, and they wail and they kind of grind away at this music. That was the root of jazz, and wherever it went from there to party music to, super high speed show off kind of stuff, to calm dance music. There's a lot of kinds of that. In fact, you could say it took off into all of American popular music. At the root of it, I always think of that part of the black experience where they chose to take their incredibly difficult experience and make it something beautiful and joyous. And I think that's the gift that we have. It's, in that specific case, it's from kind of that group of people, or it could even be from a single composer or player who's, like you were saying, Michael, like living their life through their music and sharing that with us.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time and we have to wrap up. It has been an absolutely beautiful episode, though.
Seriously. So at the end of our episodes, we like to do a takeaway from one of our hosts and a challenge from one of our guests. In this case, you.
Yeah.
Kellen, do you want to do the takeaway for this episode?
I would love to. There's a lot that I am taking away from this episode. I've definitely learned a lot, and I really hope our listeners have as well. But I know something that I will take away from this episode is definitely looking more at cultural context of music. I think that that's really interesting. A lot of times we get caught up in just, music, and it's a thing and it exists and there's cool different kinds of music, but we don't think about why they came to be and the history behind them and the context in which they were formed. And I think that's a really cool concept. So I want to look a little bit more into that.
All right, awesome. And then, Mr. Burt, do you have a challenge ready? And if you'd like, we can give you a minute to think about it.
No, yeah, I'd have something to. I have something to say. Yes, I have a challenge for the listeners. I'd say this: listen to some kind of music that you don't usually listen to, and if you need a recommendation, try Delta blues. Google Delta blues. Delta is referring to the Mississippi River Delta, being Louisiana and I guess all up the Mississippi River. That music comes from rural black people. Just after slavery had officially ended, but there was all the difficulty of sharecropping and Reconstruction and such from that period of history. It's gritty and it's painful and it's magical, and I think it's something to try to just listen to and see the humanity in. And I love Kellen's takeaway. I would just challenge any listener that wants to take it on to listen to any kind of music and look for the cultural background and what gave rise to it. It's a great idea.
Thank you. That is a wonderful challenge. Thank you guys for listening to the Paradigm Project. Please rate us 5 stars on iTunes. That would help us a lot. We have a Q&A on Spotify, and if you would like to answer that, if you want to get into contact with us, you can also email us at podcast@paradigmhigh.org, or you can DM us on Instagram @theparadigmpod. Thank you so much, guys. Keep engaging in the great conversation.